Right? So, today we're going to talk about pragmatism versus youthful optimism. When you're young, your future is bright. You got a lot to look forward to. Your career options are wide open. You could do anything in the world you want, um, which is fine. That's typically very normal for a young person not to know what they want to do. For example, there's a lot of pressure when you're first starting out. You have to decide, what path you're going to follow, what career are you going to pursue. Are you going to go to college, or you're not going to go to college? Things like this. Uh, I would say there's pragmatism, and then there's idealism. And everyone has this conflict. It's like, well, you gotta make money. You gotta pay your bills. Uh, but you also have to choose a career that you're going to dedicate your life to, or at least you think you do. So when you think about it, like, people want to become school teachers, or they want to become scientists, they want to become engineers, they want to become doctors, they want to become lawyers, things like this. Those are like idealism. They're like aspiring to a profession that interests them. There's nothing wrong with that. Whether that's computer science, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, you know, anything in the medical field. Those things are fine. A lot of times, the occupations that are the most viable are things that provide products or services that people need or want. So uh, when you think about something that's pragmatic, we often talk about skilled trades and driving truck. Driving truck is very pragmatic. There's nothing there that is necessarily something that a person would aspire to become. It's like, if you're trying to reach higher education, you don't necessarily aspire to become a truck driver. But a truck driver is very pragmatic. The pragmatic jobs pay the bills. The bank, your checking account, does not care what your occupation is or what's your source of income. You got a house payment, you got a car payment, you got to buy groceries, you got to pay utilities, you got to pay for insurance. You got to become very pragmatic. And this youthful idealism can lead you somewhat astray. It's it's something where I think it's become part of culture that go to college, get a 4-year degree, and reach for these idealism type occupations. A more pragmatic approach would be is save your money, learn a skill trade, work hard, and pay your bills. you know, I oftentimes I see people who look like they're the Walking Dead. That their dreams have died. They no longer have the spirit or the fire in their belly, to enjoy what they're doing. Sometimes pragmatism has its drawbacks too. It's the daily grind, right? It's the routine of doing repetitive work that is not, maybe not the most challenging. It may pay the bills, but it doesn't necessarily motivate you either. I think you got to find some kind of balance. You know, um, I think it's perfectly fine. You want to reach for an ideal career, but I think at some point you got to become pragmatic. The ideal career is not guaranteed, and there's going to be a lot of competition. Every year there's new college graduates, for example. So let's say you did have an engineering degree, and every year there's new graduates with engineering degrees. So you're always going to have competition from younger generations, from people who just recently graduated. And it's something like you thought the career you chose was something that you wanted to do, but now you need something that's more pragmatic. I think that's where you look at it like a plumber, for example. Is that an idealism? Is that idealistic career? Does anyone grow up, you know, and dream of their dream job is they're going to be a plumber? You know, no. Typically that's not how it works. Uh, Same thing with trucking. I could, spout the benefits of trucking till the cows come home, but people have to come to these skilled trades willingly on their own in their own time. You may not be interested in skilled trades when you have youthful idealism or optimism. you know Later, 20 years later, your priorities change. You may appreciate something that's more pragmatic. It's like, look, I don't care what the job is. Does it make any money? you know that's your priorities have changed. I think some of this is expectation. Some of it's ego. The glamour of having a high profile type job. But push come to shove, the bottom line is cash. The bottom line is money. You got to have the money in the bank account. And your bank account doesn't care what you do for a living, doesn't care what your job title is, doesn't care what your education level is, doesn't care about anything. It's just, do you have money or don't you? So this is the concept of pragmatism. Your bank is very pragmatic. Whether you qualify for a loan or not qualify for a loan, whether you have good credit, you don't have good credit, things like this. What's your overall debt situation? This is very pragmatic. This is where, if you were a plumber or a truck driver or a mechanic or something like that, you have pragmatic life skills. You're not overly idealistic about pursuing lofty careers or job titles. You're much more pragmatic. You're much more rooted into jobs that are necessary, jobs that are reliable. You know, a lot of times you look at a college graduate and they have an enormous amount of student debt. That's not pragmatic. That's not pragmatic. And then they struggle paying it off, and then they're not going to qualify for home loans or car loans or credit cards and stuff because they're carrying too much debt. It's not pragmatic. A pragmatic person is probably someone who doesn't have a glamorous job, but they do have a steady job. They have a reliable, steady job. They make reliable, steady wages, and they have a work ethic. They get up and go to work every day, and it's not something that people would normally aspire to become. But there's a lot of value in that pragmatism. You know, driving truck is not a glamorous job, but it's extraordinarily pragmatic. Moving product from point A to point B. Even today I'm hauling a load of cake mix for Hostess cupcakes, stuff like that. Nothing special, but I'm providing a product or service that people need or want. Sometimes I'm hauling medical supplies. Sometimes I'm hauling dog food. Other times I'm hauling beer. Other times I'm hauling bottled water. I'll haul toilet paper. I'll haul paper towels. I'll haul cereal. These are all things that people need and want. And the product has to move from point A to point B. The stuff is made in Wisconsin and it has to be shipped to Texas. Somebody's got to haul that. Now, that's not something that people necessarily aspire to become, but that's a very pragmatic job. So you have to think about youthful optimism versus pragmatism. And it's a shame to see people's their dream jobs, they come up short. But it's one of these things where, all right, you reached for that. Maybe you did achieve it, maybe you didn't. Maybe you had held it for a while, maybe you didn't. But now it's time to be pragmatic. Now it's time to find something that is going to put money in your bank account. Because when you go for a loan, they don't care. They don't ask you, you know, how do you like your job? They ask you, how much money you got. So this is something that you really need to think about. Is pragmatism more valuable to you than idealism? The type of career that you wish you had, but maybe the best thing for you would be something more pragmatic. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.